We'll give it a few minutes as people settle in. The participant count is jumping up. That's fun to see. All righty. Give it a couple more seconds. I'm always impatient to start these. It's like, let's just jump in, you know? All right. Okay. We'll kick it off, I guess. So thank you all for joining today. I know people will continue to file in over time. It's not a problem. We're thrilled to have you here, and also our two featured panelists, Daniel Lowe, Clubhouse Manager of Wycliffe Golf and Country Club, and Sandy Gentles, VP of Talent Point by Marriott. Both are veterans of the hospitality industry with a combined experience of not only years, but decades. These two have been in many different formats in different spaces in hospitality, and I think they'll be awesome today to feature and speak to a lot of the topics we'll be diving into today. So before we jump in, I also want to introduce myself. I'm Emma Sayanair, a marketing manager at InstaWork. For those of you that don't know us yet, InstaWork is a flexible staffing solution used by hotels, country clubs, and caterers in over 25 cities nationwide, and also Canada, which is super exciting. We're international. Our application allows businesses to book shifts for front of or back of house staff. And we have over 2 million professionals on our app at the moment, which is really cool to see, and that number is only growing. We're here today as a chance to sort of share the insights of these two seasoned professionals, explore hiring trends that have affected all of us over the past few months and year, and how to make flexible staffing a part of your toolkit. So today I'll start with a few questions for Sandy and Daniel, but of course you guys are able to jump in too. There's a Q&A place where you can just insert your questions as we go. Don't hesitate to do that. If you have comments or reactions, towards the end of the event, we'll be able to save some time for that. So we'll kind of go through that list. So don't feel like you're interrupting. The less I talk, honestly, the better. So as we're settling in, I'd love to have you guys introduce yourselves. So Sandy, can you tell us a bit more about your organization and role at Marriott?
Sure. So at Talent Point within Marriott, we're part of the global human resources function. We focus on the talent acquisition services that we can support our franchise partners with. We have over 5,600 franchise properties in the US and in Canada. And given what's been happening since the staffing crisis started, we've been working very closely with the vendors that support Marriott. So we coordinate between the vendors that support the managed side. We make those vendors available to our franchise partners, and then work directly with the franchise companies to see what their specific needs are in locations, the types of positions they need help, and then how can we get the right vendors to help them from a staffing perspective.
Wonderful. Thank you for a little bit of context on that. Daniel, what about you? What's it like being a clubhouse manager at Wycliffe?
Sure. I'm more of a traditional country club. It is one property. We do have a lot of contacts and relationship with other local clubs, but we are an independent private club. We sit on about 600 acres of land, about 1,100 homes on site, and about 1,800 members in general. Our clubhouse is about 100,000 square feet, offering every amenity you could possibly imagine, from a nail salon to bocce, to tennis, to basketball courts, pickleball, to 18-hole golf courses. We also have 5 different dining venues, card rooms, different spa amenities, fitness centers, pools on site, 3 on property itself, and just anything you can imagine to have our members stay on site. So we really are a self-independent community, so to speak, in almost right outside of West Palm Beach, Florida, in Wellington, Florida, if anybody knows that region or area. Yes.
Yeah, it sounds like if I lived there, I would never leave. Everything's covered.
You don't need to.
Yeah, you don't have to. Everything's at your fingertips.
Yeah, for those that are in the
you
restaurant,
could work there. You could work there and play there, Emma. It'd be perfect.
That's very true. You're not wrong. It's a win-win. Thank you both for that, because I know in hospitality, every segment is so different. So I think it's awesome to just sort of set the stage, really understand what things are looking like for from your perspective and also for your particular organizations. So kind of expanding on that a bit, I think in your experience, Sandy, how would you describe how staffing expectations for hospitality workers and businesses has changed in the past year? I know there's been a lot of developments in the way that people think about staffing or the way they approach it as a strategy has been sort of altered quite a bit. So I'm curious if you could speak to that a bit for us.
Yeah, and I think there's a worker perspective and there's a guest perspective, which are very different. As you can imagine, with the number of properties that were closed, the number of associates that were furloughed or that lost their jobs, the segment for hospitality became very unstable for employment, and I think people were impacted by that dramatically. And their view of that segment still, I think, has one of the key things we have to do is help them understand that things are back, that leisure, business, events are all back on. There's plenty of great career opportunity, but I think one of the key things that shifted during COVID, especially from an hourly perspective, is people have really decided that there are things that are very important to them outside of the workplace, and that they are very willing to work, but they want to work when they want to work. And so I think for from the candidates that we're looking at, the associates that we have on property, and then the temp companies we're working with, it's really trying to figure out three key components. So are we providing the right schedule that fits the worker? Are we providing the pay rate that is competitive to the city? So we're no longer competing against the property down the street, the hotel down the street. We're literally competing against all of the businesses, whether it's Bank of America, the movie theater, the bowling alley. So the pay rate has to be competitive, for the worker. And then we have to have some type of what is my next step? So if I come in at this position, what am I going to be doing 3, 6, and 12 months from now? Is there a progression opportunity? So that's one of the key things that we're working towards, even with our temp and gig providers, because, in order for those workers to pick, even if it's a shift versus a career, we have to make that opportunity meet those three segments around what the workers are looking for these days.
Yeah, so one thing, sorry, that just comes to mind as you're speaking is this bit about really selling a long-term benefit and really thinking about how to portray yourself and your organization as an opportunity to have a career and have this growth. Is there specific ways that your team has tried to do that in terms of messaging, or maybe how you're reaching people, where you're sourcing them from, things like that?
I mean, I think, one of the key things that we're trying a lot of different approaches. Because we have so many properties, we have the ability to test those out, and different approaches work in different markets, with different degrees of success. So one of the key things we've seen that is working is being able to showcase to a temp worker or a gig worker, we're going to have you come in, and our need right now is at front desk, or is in the restaurant. And in order for us to have them perform at peak capacity, there's investment required in training for them. So when we find somebody that has the personality, and we're really looking for personality first, because we can train on the other stuff. I've seen Daniel in action. I mean, they can train too, right? I think it's the key is finding the right person. When we find that right person, showcasing to them, this is a starting point, right? So we're going to do this for a month. Then we're going to move you to, this position for a month. And then you can come in, as a supervisor or as a full-time associate once those pieces are done. I think it gives them the perspective to try a couple of different positions while they're learning those pieces, and then have an endpoint where they can choose if they want to then become a full-time associate.
So basically like a trial period, and on both sides, being able to sort of experience them for their fit and personality, which we'll dive into later. As well as on your end, making sure that they are trainable and going to be something that can be, or someone that can be successful long term. Thank you. Daniel, what about you? I know that country clubs are super seasonal in a lot of ways when it comes to staffing. So I'm curious how you have adapted your approach in that sense. I know that you guys have done a lot to really market Wycliffe as a potential location for people to work at. So I'd love for you to speak to that a little bit.
Sure. Nowadays, you kind of see how things have evolved. You look at how things have evolved from way back in the day where the wealthy had cars and not so wealthy had horses. And nowadays, the wealthy have horses and everyone has a car. So as times change, we also need to change. And we're finding that the market has really, really affected us differently. And it's really more of we talk about trickle down effect all the time. But right now, I'm not having problems finding managers. I think the new generation's coming out of school expecting to be a manager. So that's not our challenge area. It's really the foundation of our everyday staff from the root bottom up. So it's a trickle up effect. We're talking about everyone from dishwashers to the bussers to the servers on the floor. How do we find those candidates and how do we keep those candidates over time? And I think that's the biggest challenge, especially with a lot of people and different incentives. And for us, it's really, how do you change your culture? What's the most important aspect of culture for them? We do have seasonal opportunities here, mostly summer, because during our real tree season, we have internationals that come in through the H-2B program, which has really been helping us a lot to make it through the large volume that we do receive during that time. However, even they have a desire to feel wanted. So we've done a lot of things as far as culture to change how we think about our everyday employee. Things like we redid our break room. We renovated it to be about 3 times the size of it. We added a chef on site who can actually cook a meal for you. So it's not a buffet style. You walk up and you kind of tell them what they want and they can get whatever you want in that aspect. So that really helps coming on site, going to work, having a great meal, which is free, and then going into work, which is sometimes a lot of work, not gonna lie. But it's also, how do we build that culture in regards to incentives? We've created something called the Wycliffe Wow, and here's a sticker of it. We stick that onto an Amazon gift card, and every time somebody does a Wycliffe Wow, the name of our club is Wycliffe, by the way, a Wycliffe Wow, you put that on there and say, hey, you did a wow today. And it really builds up their incentive, because while you can't necessarily change their hourly rate all the time, what you can do is give them added bonuses, such as a Wycliffe $25 Amazon gift card, and say, you did a great job. You do enough of those throughout the month, and you're actually looking at a higher pay rate if you really think about the breakdown of it all. There's also internal promotions that we look at. So a lot of our staff from the inside, we make sure that we look internally first before we look outside, trying to get the best internal candidates to show everybody that if you work hard enough and dedicate enough time, we will obviously promote you from within. And that's really a cultural plus when it comes to having a larger organization or being able to tap from other organizations like Sandy has with multiple units. Constant affirmation, we have found that this is a huge thing. Just basically saying on an everyday level, you're doing a good job. Emma, you're doing a great job today. Thank you very much for getting this call together and really making it happen. Just those little statements alone makes it feel like I'm an employee and I'm cared about. And that really goes to the whole sense of, if you can communicate on their level, you have won them over. And that's so important to really think about. Communicating on their level, understanding that they are going through a certain thing, understanding that our members are very, very particular, understanding that you are with them. You're talking to them as a one-on-one, as opposed to a manager talking down to them. So I think it's really important that constant affirmation, making sure that they're taking care of their personal lives as well, and that you're understanding that sometimes you do need to call out. everyone's really living life to the fullest at this point. And that's really what it is. And people are understanding that life's too short. They're seeing their friends and families dying of COVID around them. There's a war on TV. They talk about the millions of people that are dying. They're like, I'm not going to live my life to work. I'm going to live my life. And if work fits within my little box of my life, then I'm going to do it. If not, I'm not going to do it. We had over 300 million retirements this year, which is unprecedented. It is unbelievable the amount of people that have retired because they realize that life's too short. I'm going to live it now before it's too late. I'm not going to work till I'm 68, 70 years old anymore. I'm going to retire early and really take advantage of the life as we see it. So for us, it's really been a challenge to understand where do we go from here. But it's little things having to do with culture mostly that have helped us retain our employees.
Thank you for that. I think one thing that really does speak true from one thing that both of you mentioned is that people really do want to work. They just want to do it on their own terms. What that means for them can be different, whether that's pay or flexibility or maybe mobility, that they can move for 6 months out of the year, whatever that looks like. But taking advantage of understanding what they're looking for and what drives them, whether that's being able to advance in their career or feeling validated and appreciated at their job that is often thankless. Hospitality can be really difficult. People are not always the sweetest, kindest people. And so I think one sort of thing that we've realized as well at InstaWork has been that providing these validations and these sort of bonuses for top performers has been huge in encouraging them to pick up more work and continuing to work. So for example, our Top Pro program rewards people with cash bonuses or early access to shifts or even additional visibility to certain jobs. And over 50% of the shifts last month were covered by top pros. So they're actually picking up majority of the work that's being done. And they're probably people that are not only highly motivated, but really making a large portion of their income on a flexible platform for these incentive reasons. So I think one sort of major question and the reason why a lot of people are attending today is about sourcing and finding these qualified, reliable staff in an industry that is continued to be so inconsistent. There's, as you mentioned, all these retirements, Daniel. There's been a lot of shifts in just the type of what the workforce looks like, as you mentioned, Sandy. So I'm sort of would love to hear a bit more about how your team has started to integrate flexible models or temp staff, or how they've started to expand their pool of potential candidates, I guess, to sort of fill the work that needs to be done. So Sandy, if you want to start, you can jump in there.
I think the first thing, and Daniel can probably attest this as well, is while the worker expectations have changed, the guest expectations, I think, have only grown higher, right? They've been locked in the house for 2 years. They finally get out. They're going to the hotel. They're going to the country club. They want the full experience, right? And they're going to let you know if they're not happy. So I think the expectations have definitely grown from a guest perspective. I think for us, in terms of from the staffing piece, we're really getting a lot of leverage from our staffing partners, because it is difficult for us from a scheduling perspective to be as nimble as we want to be with the scheduling. And I think one of the things we've been talking about is that is a very important factor in the hourly workforce these days, is being able to work when they want to work. And so one of the key things that we've changed in terms of how we're approaching this with our staffing partners is we are really looking for the personality. We're really looking for the willingness to do that particular role that's needed, and we're okay if there are if we need 2 servers for the property, but we have 10 to 12 temp providers that we know can come in and fulfill it. We're okay to keep that mix of having the availability across multiple people, and that they change in and out depending on when they want to work. I think for us, the staffing company has been more efficient from a scheduling perspective to meet that, when are the shifts available. And one of the key things, that we've tried to work with the staffing partners is once we identify that person that is either already able to deliver top level service or that we see has the ability to be trained, what can we do to incentivize them to pick up more shifts? And so that comes down to, are we offering same day pay? Are we offering a bonus for signing up for, hey, I'll take 5 shifts at this property in the next 30 days. I'll let you know when I'm ready to take those because it has to fit my schedule, but I'm willing to sort of make that commitment. And then am I able to refer people that I know into the program to help grow the number of participants that we have available to us? And then, what do they have? Is there, once they meet a certain number of shifts they completed or a rating that they've gotten, is there an extra bonus that comes in with that? It's all about, finding the right people that we can then train to be efficient, but then what can we do to help them make our shifts be top of mind? And I think that's the critical part.
Thank you. And Daniel, I know that you are really big on scheduling and that you have sort of an approach that you take that's a little bit unique on that. So I wonder if you could speak to sort of what you've learned in the past or how you've sort of executed on scheduling to increase accountability for your staff.
Sure. I think as we evolve, we've realized the past 2 years that, again, people want to work when they want to work. It used to be that we'd tell you when you were working and we'd make your schedule. And if you couldn't show up, too bad. It's your schedule and you better be on it. So we've actually taken that on a different approach. We've said, when do you want to work? You give us your ideal schedule. You send it to us, what days you want to work, what times you want to work, and we'll do our best to make that schedule happen. However, if you actually send us this schedule and you don't call in or don't show up, that's putting the onus back on you because that's exactly what you sent us. And so that's really been helping us as far as keeping them accountable for what they've put in. And we're not actually forcing them to work their schedule. They're telling us when they want to work, and we've just been scheduling according to what they've wanted to work. So in a way, it's kind of putting it back on them as well, which has really helped out. Not to say that they're still on call outs, but it helps a lot more as far as them thinking, okay, I've done this to myself. It's not the company doing this to me. And I think that's been the biggest change for us. Definitely has been a better result. And also people coming to work happier because they say, you know what, this fits into my schedule because I've sent this schedule in. So it's been helpful for sure.
Wonderful. Yeah, it seems that this big piece around accountability has been huge to sort of contribute to reliable, consistent work. So I think one question that I have is when you're suddenly hit with a gap, right? There's a blank in the schedule. What's sort of your first instinct, Daniel? What do you sort of jump to when it becomes sort of crisis mode? Because I know that that's a lot of the time that people here or in our audience, for example, might be struggling the most, where you're able to plan, you're able to set it up to your best of your abilities, and then it's life, something goes wrong. But how do you make the show sort of go on from there?
Yeah, for us, there's always something going on. We have 5 different units that have dining capabilities. And for us, it's really being about fluidity, about being able to pivot at the last second. So things that we've done to kind of pivot at the last second, and this mostly goes for country clubs because you pretty much create the calendar of operations in advance. A la carte has always been a challenge. I will be honest, I do not use Instaworks to take a la carte orders. Number one, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, they don't know our menu that well. They don't know our members' preferences very well. And they also don't know our iPad ordering system very well. So I would just be setting myself up for failure and them up for failure as well if I put that on them. So what we've been doing kind of is when it's an a la carte night and we have call outs in the morning, we will immediately go to InstaWork. Good thing about InstaWork versus temp agencies is InstaWork is 2 hours prior to the actual shift start time is when you can put requests in, and they're filled pretty quickly, which is amazing. And then if that happens, I'll go to Chef and say, Chef, we need something different tonight. And he'll come up with a really great priced action station or a pasta station, which is going to be half of the regular price of a entree menu item. So that kind of directs a lot of our a la carte traffic to the stations themselves, allowing us to have less of our local service staff on board. We've also looked at where are we going to be in a couple of weeks once our internationals leave? What are we going to do? We've created different programming. So instead of doing a la carte nights, Thursday through Saturday, now we're doing a buffet option for a themed buffet, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all different themes, but a buffet option, which is allowing us to bring a lot more InstaWorks in and still having the members' satisfaction go through the roof because it's something that they enjoy as far as the cuisine that we're offering. So that's really been helpful for us on a pivot scale and being able to kind of change our programming according to our staffing availability.
Wonderful. It looks like a question just came in, but let's see, it was just specifically for you, Daniel, following up on this. So when putting in schedule requests in the hands of your employees, so just sort of speaking to this whole accountability bit, are you able to find enough staff in these particular, like for filling these buffets even when it is sort of that crisis mode? So despite having the scheduling, despite having InstaWork as a backup, is there sort of any sort of negative effects that you've seen to that, whether providing too much ownership to staff or maybe creating complications within the scheduling, or has it been primarily just adapting on your end and filling the staff roles instead?
Yeah, I look at it kind of, I don't know if anybody plays fantasy football out there, but it literally is a fantasy football. Not everyone wants the same days off. People go to church on Sunday. People want Mondays off because it's the holiday day that they don't like to go to work. It really depends on the individual. And we found that when you allow them to put their requests in, there's not many overlaps. Not everyone wants weekends off because they don't like the traffic at the grocery store or whatever it might be. It's really been kind of surprising to see that all of these people want different things because everyone's life is different and everyone has different obligations and different wants and needs. So we found it to be pretty successful. And we've also found that it also helps with hiring. So if you tell somebody, you can pretty much work whenever you want, just send us a schedule as long as you're hitting your 40 hours. They're like, yes, absolutely. Are you serious? And they immediately jump to the gun, even though it's paying the same as a club down the street or a hotel down the street, just giving that availability to them to kind of make their own schedule has really, really, really been helpful for sure.
Awesome.
And I think for us on the hotel side, I'll echo everything that Daniel, said about that. I think we tend to have like a 90% coverage when we're doing the make your own schedules, though there will always be certain ones that are difficult to fill. And nowadays it's sort of the school pickup times and the school drop off times, are much more difficult, especially for working parents. What we do when we have those particular ones is we'll change the pay rate for those hours to make sure that there's an incentive to pick those up. We'll give people the option to pick a certain number of those per month, and then they're bonus eligible for that. We also have, the hotels where we have full service restaurants, we'll give them the option to take home like a free family dinner for the whole family. We're trying to find ways, and I think Daniel gave some good examples before of what do we have available that we can help provide them that makes our choice of taking the shift more interesting than somewhere else.
Yeah, I think both of you have spoken to this sort of idea of creating a system that's sort of symbiotic, where you're providing something for these staff members, whether they're part or full-time, and they're more motivated to sort of give back to you, and in turn creating a really strong culture of accountability, but also sort of, like you said, Daniel, excited to be there and ready to work. But I know that, well, a resume is a huge portion of sourcing quality staff. Businesses know that that doesn't always translate to the in-person experience. Someone can have everything on paper, look perfect, and then something just doesn't quite fit in person. And so one thing that I would really like to dive in to, Daniel, is I know that you go through a unique process when you interview people, and really sort of maximize that in-person experience and the time that you have to really gauge their engagement with your property, but also with your team. So if you could speak to maybe how you confirm a quality fit beyond just an initial resume, that would be great.
Sure, no, absolutely. When I interview the candidates, granted, if they show up, that is.
Right.
Let's start there. So if they actually show up, I'll sit down with them for maybe about 2 to 3 minutes, just let them settle in, let them get their nerves off, and I'll pick up the paper and I'll go through the resume, and I'll just say, just tell me about this one. I'll just pick some random one that has to do with hospitality, and they'll tell me about it. I'm like, okay, so they understand how to answer questions back, and I get that aspect to them. And then I basically put it aside and I said, I don't even care about that. In my mind, that means nothing. That literally is a piece of paper. And then I say, you want to go on a tour? And of course, oh, yeah, of course. So I bring them on a tour, and along the tour, I see how fast do they walk? Are they courteous? Do they let people go through doors first? Do they say hello to people walking in the hallways? Do they greet the members? Do they step out of the way when people are coming through? I also plan a few things along the way. So I'll make sure that I put a piece of paper on the ground along their path and see if they pick it up. And if they do, I almost automatically know that this is the right person, because they care. They're putting themselves out there to say, this is someplace I want to make clean. This is someplace I want to take care of, and treat it like their second home. I also bring them to the dish pit, and I make a comment and say, man, that dish pit is backed up. What are they doing over there? And they'll see how they respond. Do they say, oh my gosh, Daniel, that's unbelievable. Why aren't they doing their job? Or do they say, they probably have a lot going on, that it was end of lunch shift, or they're working hard over there. I just see how they interact with their fellow coworkers, because if you think about it, they're coworkers at the end of the day. So how do you treat someone who is at your own level? How do you respect them at their own level? Then I walk them past the host stands, see how they interact with the hostesses. I walk them past, I ask them what their favorite foods are, or if there's anything that they notice about the buffet or what's coming out on the grill line. And then I'll walk them to the fitness center, see how fit they are. If they know that, oh yeah, I work out a couple times a week. Those are all things that kind of triggers a conversation. And it also allows them to really feel like they're special. If I bring somebody on a tour, that means I'm investing the time in them to show them around the property. By the time they're done with the tour, they see the property and they say, when can I start? They wanna be part of this. And I make sure I walk them through the employee break room, and I let them know that the fixtures in the bathrooms are more expensive than the fixtures in the members' bathrooms. But I don't tell the members that. But those are all things that they want to work. They want to be part of that culture and organization, because they feel so important and they feel like they're part of the family. And that's really what I want to involve them in when I give them the tour.
Thank you. I think that walkthrough, when you first mentioned that, was sort of a little bit of a shock almost to me, to think of all the small details and all of those little bits that feed into personality, but being able to set someone in a place that they feel comfortable and that they're able to be themselves, I think really illuminates that personality and fit a lot clearer for people that are looking to hire and sort of pull these people onto their staff. Sandy, what about in your experience? Is there something that's been a particularly strong indicator of a candidate's potential success at Marriott? Whether that's more a personality type or quality, or whether that's something you're able to sort of pick up on or look for in initial interviews?
I mean, it was funny. There's a story that goes around Marriott about how Mr. Marriott was on a headquarters tour with one of our high level executive candidates, and when they walked into the hallway leading to his office, she stepped over a piece of paper, which he then leaned down and picked up and put in the garbage. And he knew that he would not be picking her for the position. So we have a similar one, but we're much larger. So from an efficiency perspective, unless Daniel could come over and run 88,000 of those for us per week, it would be difficult. So I think for us, we rely more on, from an internal perspective, our assessments that we do, and the assessments would be, fit for that particular position. So obviously we're not going to have a housekeeper provide a resume or, even, a written assessment response. It's all done via pictures, right? Choose which picture, represents what, the way that this should be done. And so I think from a scale perspective, that's good. I think, from our temp partners, what we like about working with companies like InstaWork is being able to see, the previous experience and the ratings that they get, because it's such a small community. And we're not talking just hospitality, we're talking restaurants, country clubs, that, if another manager, someone like a Daniel, has put in a rating with a comment around how this person did as a server, busser, or cook or sous chef, whatever it might be, then I'm going to trust that in a very high regard compared to what the candidate's telling me in their 30-second elevator pitch, or even what the salesperson from the temp company is telling me. And so for us, being able to have partners that enable us to see those ratings really helps from a staffing perspective, especially when we're looking at some of the departments that require a large number of hourly. We're looking at more of like a pyramid, right? So where we can say, let's bring in someone that's much harder to find because they have 6 years of experience here, but we found one, and then we'll bring underneath that person, some complementary people. Maybe this person has 1 year experience, and then these others are more general labor type. They have, they're eager to do it. They just don't have the experience. And so by creating more of a pyramid, we can help get that knowledge down to all members of the team, but still be able to deliver that high level of service for the customer. So I think that's one of the critical things, and what we like, especially when our managers are providing the feedback after those individual shifts, that we know and we can target the people that receive those higher ratings going forward, which is always good.
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, InstaWork has the really strong rating system that provides a lot of visibility around that. But I also mentioned this sort of roster system, which is where partners like yourselves can add 5-star staff members and pros that they work with to an on-call list. So you're just constantly able to reach out to those people repeatedly, so you don't have to continuously refilter from start to end. You have the people that you've worked with, determine that they're a fit, that they work well with the coworkers and their team. And then from there, they're able to return over and over to the same properties. Excuse me. But one thing that I also, on top of this sort of roster system that you've spoken to and rating system as well, Sandy, I know that you're really well versed in flexible staffing, but there's some people I think in the audience that are less familiar with sort of this model or how they can maximize it as a tool for their team. So Marriott locations have booked shifts with InstaWork for years, but I'm curious for someone who's brand new to flexible staffing, maybe not even clear how they can start. What are some benefits, or why would you recommend that this is something that people include or start to think about as we ramp up into the spring and summer?
Well, I think the staffing, in North America right now is going through, an even more difficult period than even 2 weeks ago, because, everything's now open that hasn't been open in 2 years. And like I said before, movie theaters, bowling alleys, I mean, it's all open, and we're all competing for that same, person in the hourly space. I think one of the benefits, that we like in the partnership is, and I'll tell you, when you're thinking about this, obviously the more time, the further in advance that you can start the conversation, the better. And so our formula is to, when we have a new hotel that hasn't used InstaWork before, we set up a meeting for the InstaWork local team managers to come over to the property and do a walkthrough of the property, so they understand exactly, when we're talking, restaurant, what does a restaurant look like? When we're talking gym or pool or whatever it might be, like, this is what it looks like. And then there are some functions that are booked far enough out, like weddings and birthday parties, where we know in advance, to place an order to get people signed up. In fact, one of our biggest success that we had, which I actually I was really excitedly shocked to see, is we sent out a note to the properties are looking at, New Year's Eve. And New Year's Eve had, we probably had an over 60% response rate to the note that we sent out, saying that we had InstaWork staff available to help support. And it was just, it was that one night that people decided, like, we're gonna go out. It's been 2 years, and we knew that we needed staff. One of the, and this sort of goes with, like, what our formula is, which is we have to have very upfront and frank conversations around the skill levels of people that are going to show up. Because if our managers know that this person, doesn't have bartending experience, but can be, very successful as a bar back, we can put them in that position very quickly, and in a couple of minutes, get them trained enough to be able to be a very successful bar back. But if we're told that a bartender is coming, and then we realize during assessment or during the training piece that they don't, that creates a much bigger issue. So we've really encouraged frank discussions, and we tend to discuss, the workers that come as more of a general labor than a, expert in their particular position. So we're looking at ways of doing things that we didn't do before, because we had to be flexible. So it's very hard to find housekeepers. So how about this? Instead, we're going to have, a housekeeping helper, and the housekeeping helper, all they're going to do is they're going to empty the trash, and they're going to take the sheets off the bed. That's it. And then they're going to mark the room ready for housekeeping. But that can get us far enough ahead where we're not having guests impacted by sitting downstairs waiting for their room. So upfront communication, flexibility, and where you have the ability to place the larger orders in advance.
I appreciate the insight, and also for I think flexible staffing or even InstaWork, it's awesome to sort of have a clear visibility as to what, an honest, discussion as to what can be done and what can't. There's obviously things that like this helping sort of system that can simplify the process and make things a little bit more streamlined for your core staff, even without sort of entirely renovating or starting from nothing. So sort of as support. So Daniel, what about you in the country club space? Have you seen particular benefits? I know you mentioned that when you're sort of cohort of international people leave, that it's often a bit of a gap during that time. So what's sort of been your approach there?
Even right now, when we are in the heart of the season and we still have the internationals, we have about 48 internationals that come in to help us. But even then, there are still gaps from events that go from 150 people to 200 and we are not able to really hold that number and service that number, we really need to find people at the last minute. So having that roster really helps us because we can see the same people over. And the good thing about the roster is you're not constantly having to retrain when a new face comes in the room. You're getting the same names that, okay, John, you're back again. You know the drill. You're going to be in this section helping out our full-time server, Bill. You guys can work as a team, just kind of backfill anything that Bill might need. So John already knows where everything is. He knows where the beverage station is. He knows where the dish pit is. He knows how to separate everything in the dish pit. So it really helps us out. The good thing about the roster system is that those people on our roster get to see the posts first. And if I know I have a really top 2 or 3 people on my roster, I will actually text them and say, just posted a gig, heads up. And so they constantly refresh in order to get it, and then they pick it up real fast. There are instances where you actually create a relationship with that roster candidate, and you have a frank conversation like Sandy's saying, face to face, and they said, I picked up a shift tomorrow, but I'm going to be running late. So I just say, don't worry, I'll call InstaWork. They'll drop you off at no penalty, and then somebody else can pick it up. So having that relationship with your roster is really a great thing. It's almost like an extension of your everyday employee, your everyday full-time employee. And as far as customer service goes, InstaWorks customer service is really unbelievable. 24 hours a day, which I don't really sleep. So even at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm texting them and they can fix it for me, which is incredible. This sounds like a plug for InstaWork, but it actually really, really does work well. But rosters are definitely something you want to do. And also it'll just help you out as far as the training goes. We did create an online training tool. It is actually a website that I built, which gives all the standards of every aspect, how to set the table, where the dish pit, where it should look like, how much you should fill up a glass. It has everything top to bottom done through different chapters. So if anybody ever wanted to reference that, it's available through their phone. They can actually go look at videos that we've created on how to make roll-ups or how to set the table in a video that we've recorded and posted on our website, which allows any of the InstaWork to kind of go in there, kind of get a feel of what our service standards are like, depending on which location they're going to. We usually indicate when we're booking a gig where they're going. So it'll say grill dinner so that they can get a heads up, oh, I'm going to be in the grill. Each place also has a different dress code. And on InstaWork, you can actually change the dress code according to where you are sending that person. So white bistro or white polo shirt or a button-down shirt, depending on where they're going in the property, which has really helped out a lot. So rosters are only to your advantage, and it's only going to help. I don't think you can do it through the actual app right now. It's only through the website, but it's definitely good to put the rating in there and add them to your roster. They get first dibs essentially when you put the gig on.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Daniel,
course.
for your kind words. But also it's true. I mean, I think a big portion is when you provide training, when you provide support, provide validation, like Wycliffe has nearly a 90% fill rate. Like people love working with you guys and you've had hundreds of shifts. So I think it all sort of comes together in not just understanding how you can maximize the roster, but building those relationships, like you mentioned, where you can reach out to a pro and have the empathy where like, okay, I can find someone new. Thanks for the heads up. But also they believe like you're looking out for them. This is a part of your, like you said, an extension of your team that hopefully feels like family and sort of a full-time support. So Sandy, in your case, I was sort of curious whether you've done anything similar around training, because I know Daniel has an elaborate sort of system that's been built out, but I think when it comes to scale, it can often be difficult to think about how thousands of people might go through a training and making that sort of affordable as an organization and possible as an organization, but also where to sort of start with that.
So I think from an internal perspective with the with the hourly and part-time hires we're making, we do have training that we provide in advance of them starting their shift. And it can be done through their phone, and it's role-based. We do not have that for the temp and gig companies. And I think one of the key things, that we've been working with is, and I think Daniel brought up a good point, is there's, in order to have somebody get to the location in time and know what to wear in advance, even if we're going to be providing, a golf shirt or something that goes over what they're wearing, it's always good to have, set the expectation in advance of, khaki pants and a white shirt, khaki pants and a black shirt. I think those minimal things that, that we request have been done through the order form with Instawork and have proven to be very successful. It would be great for us to figure out a way to leverage a tool like Daniel's doing, but on a larger scale, since the position titles that we're requesting are very similar across the properties, regardless of location. So I definitely going to be stealing a lot of Daniel's ideas. They're really good. And I think the key is going to be, how do we make it most efficient for somebody to decide, hey, I've been driving past that Renaissance for a couple of weeks. I should check and see if there's positions available there, and then being able to start. And then I think, and what do we need to do to retain them to want to come back, whether that's in a, in a shift version, in a temp version, or a full-time associate version.
Wonderful. And I think just before we close it out to sort of a Q&A last bit, if there's sort of one piece of advice that you could give someone who is looking to start integrating flexible or temp staff into their team, what advice would you give them, regardless of service that they use or the staff that they need, segment, whatever it might be, but sort of a starting piece of advice that you wish you would have known when you started using this sort of tool. Daniel, do you want to start?
Sure. I would just say get started right away. This is literally a lifesaver. If it were not for Instawork last summer, we probably would have had to shut down operations. And we cannot use the excuse that we don't have enough staff. That just does not fly. So whatever it takes, and as much as I love bussing tables, Instawork is going to help you not have to bus tables, because you'll get somebody in there as your support and backfill where you have gaps. So the sooner the better. It literally costs you absolutely nothing until they actually come on site. And if you are able to think ahead as far as your schedule goes, the cost of an Instawork a week out will be less than a cost of an Instawork 2 hours out. So just understand that planning ahead and being able to put the gigs in a week in advance is going to save you a lot of money, as opposed to a last minute, oh my gosh, I need somebody, I had 2 people call out. So just plan ahead, and I'd say get started right away, because it's only going to help you.
What about you, Sandy?
I think getting the people out far enough in advance, whether it's, an hour, 2 hours, or a week, and however much time you can give your managers to spend with these people to get them ready, and to have the managers understand, these are general labor type resources that are excited to come on property, but they're going to need, a little bit more of a deep dive in terms of the actual specifics of what we're looking for to create that guest experience. Number one, then you're setting the manager and team lead expectations in terms of, well, I'm not, I need to go a little bit slower to make sure that it, we can give a full scope for them to understand. But then also, maybe instead of, well, our typical training includes these 16 points and they're going to be handling, these 10 things during a shift. Maybe it's not 10, maybe it's 5, right? Maybe we give them a chance to come in and help, like I said, from more of a helper role, an assistant role that enables us to, to help bring in more support, but not overwhelm the people that are doing that, so they'll want to come back.
So it sounds like just sort of making feasible steps that people can feel successful in, but also recognizing sort of bandwidth and capability beyond that. Awesome.
Yep.
Great. So I'll dive into a couple questions, just Q&A. If you guys have any residual ones, feel free to send them in. But it looks like I'll give a little bit of time for everyone. Oh, we have a raised hand. If you're able to add just to the chat, that would be great for any questions you guys have. One question that popped up about temp to hire work and around placement fees. I know that this is different for every platform, but I'm curious whether either of you have gone through the process of long-term assignment or temp to hire in your past staffing experiences.
Marriott requires every staffing contract to have a temp to hire component. So we use this all the time.
Are there particular roles that you typically do this for over other positions?
All positions.
Okay.
And the way that we structure it is, we'll set a baseline and we'll say, if this person has come in through the agency and they've been here for, this number of hours, so they've just started off, then we're going to pay a higher rate to hire them in within the first 2 weeks. If then, if it's within, and then maybe it's within a month, they've been here this long, so then the fee will drop down over time until it gets to zero. So the quicker we move to make a higher, the higher percentage we'll pay. But it'll eventually get to zero in terms of, when we make that higher.
What about at Wycliffe, Daniel? Have you
We
guys?
have not done any temp to hires. It's not something that we typically do.
Mhm. Yeah, every business is different. It's just more speaking to the experience of your particular org. So just wanted to touch on that for our audience members. Is there any last questions as we finish up? We have a few minutes left. Send them in the chat if you do. We did. Thank you, Megan. So what are some top incentives that you've used specifically for part-time employees? I know you guys spoke to this sort of growth, professional advancement, having sort of bonuses and culture, but is there a specific approach you use just for attracting people to your shifts, for example? Or is it just general branding has sort of been the experience?
I would say it's a mix depending on location or property, but it would include things like same day pay, free meals on-site, free meals to bring home to the family, bonuses for, like retention bonuses so that maybe the pay rate goes up for each week that you stay. There might be a bonus for the number of shifts that you take. So if you take 10 shifts, once you finish the 10th shift, you would get a cash bonus. Those are the typical things we would do. Transportation, especially in locations where there's not a lot of public transportation, we would provide public transportation to help with that. That seems to be sort of the top ones I can remember.
It's a solid laundry list, I think.
Yeah, that sounds pretty long.
Yeah.
Really.
Daniel picks you up at the house with a WOW card. I mean, it's perfect.
We actually do have shuttle buses for our H2Bs, which we have housing down the street for them available. But for us, as far as incentives go, it really becomes, once you become a full-time employee, the benefits really kick in. You're actually part of our Go 365, which is an incentive program for a healthy lifestyle. That's everything from challenges for walking, drinking your water each week, eating fruit each week, and you get points essentially that you could cash in for dollar amounts as far as Amazon dollar amounts or grocery store dollar amounts. So we help them through our Paycom system, which is tied into our insurance program, which helps us at the end of the day. So that's one incentive that we have there. Another thing also is when you become a full-time employee, instead of waiting a year for sick pay, you get automatically 3 sick days, because whether you're a full-time employee a year from now or a full-time employee now, you're still going to get sick, which is why I don't understand why people wait so long in order to be able to be sick. It doesn't make sense. So you get it right off the bat. As soon as you become an employee, you get 3 sick days right away, paid. So.
Great. Hopefully that answered your question, Megan. But I know that we're right up on 11. Well, for me, I'm in San Francisco. But I just wanted to thank you all for being here today, especially Daniel and Sandy. You guys have amazing insight. So many things that I picked up from you guys, learning about country clubs, hotels, catering, hospitality in general. And appreciate all of you guys in the audience taking the time to tune in today. I hope you guys left with some ideas on how to tackle staffing this spring. If you'd like to reference anything we discussed today, we will have this recording. You can look at our faces as many times as you want on YouTube later this week, and I'll be sharing it over email. We've also added the link to the training in the chat here, but I'll also be including that in the email that I send out. So if you guys want to be able to reference this, it's super cool. There's a lot of modules. I think that would be the best place to look for it. And as always, thank you guys for stopping by, and feel free to reach out to InstaWork if you ever need any staffing. So thank you all, and we'll hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.